I thought catching my 19-year-old brother with my wife was my life's worst shock, until she revealed they'd secretly been married before we even met. The afternoon sun cast long, gentle shadows across the quiet street as I parked my car in the driveway, the sight of my home initially comforting. Yet, a strange unease lingered in the air, gnawing softly at the back of my mind. My business trip had ended early, and I'd eagerly sped homeward to surprise Hannah, my wife of 3 years. With a bouquet of fresh flowers lying on the passenger seat, I felt buoyed by the idea of seeing her smile. Hannah was vibrant and captivating, the kind of woman whose laughter could light up even the dreariest days. Stepping from the car, I inhaled deeply, letting the scent of jasmine and lilac from our front garden soothe me. A brief glance at my phone revealed no new messages, just a quiet confirmation that my arrival remained unexpected. A thrill fluttered in my chest. Surprises had always been Hannah's favorite, and I was looking forward to spending some overdue quality time together. I turned my key quietly in the lock, not wanting to ruin the surprise, and stepped inside. The foyer was dim, with only thin rays of afternoon sunlight piercing through the gaps in the blinds. The silence felt heavy, almost unnatural. Perhaps Hannah had decided to take a nap? My eyes landed on a pair of unfamiliar sneakers haphazardly tossed near the doorway, starkly contrasting the neatness Hannah always insisted upon. Strange, I thought, puzzled but not immediately alarmed. Perhaps Hannah had a friend over. She often entertained in my absence. Still, an odd tension lingered as I carefully placed the flowers on the small oak table, the paper wrapping rustling softly in the stillness. Hannah, I called gently, moving towards the staircase. Silence was my only reply. A vague uneasiness twisted in my stomach, as though I were intruding upon something I shouldn't. Shaking off the feeling, I began to climb the stairs, each step creaking slightly beneath my feet. Halfway up, I paused, my heart suddenly racing as a faint noise echoed from our bedroom. A muffled laugh, distinctly male, followed by Hannah's soft giggle. My throat tightened involuntarily. Instinctively, I slowed, dread coiling around my thoughts. What could possibly be so amusing in our private bedroom, especially without me present? The hallway felt suffocating as I approached the half-open bedroom door, my pulse roaring in my ears. Deep down, some part of me already understood what was happening, but another stubbornly refused to acknowledge the inevitable. Pushing the door open with trembling fingers, I stared into a scene that shattered my world. Hannah lay in bed, her silky auburn hair spilling around her flushed cheeks, eyes widening in shock as our gazes locked. Beside her, frozen in equal disbelief, was the unmistakable figure of my younger brother. Alex, barely 19, and utterly ashamed as realization dawned upon him. The room swayed dangerously beneath my feet as my vision blurred, nausea surging up my throat. What the hell is going on? I managed, my voice trembling with rage, confusion, and something deeper, an agony so intense it felt physical. Hannah jolted upright, clutching the sheets protectively around herself as panic flooded her eyes. "Please," she whispered desperately, the plea thin and unconvincing. It's not what it looks like." I stared blankly at her, then at Alex. He shrank away from me, guilt etched into every youthful line of his face. This was the boy I'd protected my entire life. The same brother I defended when he faced bullying at school, and taught to ride a bike when our father was too busy working. I'd never imagined this betrayal. Never even conceived that someone I trusted implicitly could pierce me so deeply. Alex cleared his throat nervously, his voice breaking as he stammered. "I'm sorry, I didn't." "Shut up," I snapped, my voice quiet but lethal. The silence that fell was thick and heavy, broken only by the uneven rhythm of our strained breathing. My eyes bored into Hannah, desperate for answers yet terrified of hearing them. "How long?" She hesitated, the shame evident in the tremor of her hands. "I didn't mean to." "How long?" My voice sharpened into a blade, cutting her flimsy excuses into silence. "For months," Alex finally whispered, his eyes fixed firmly on the ground, avoiding my gaze at all costs. "I'm so sorry. We didn't want it to happen. It was a mistake." I laughed, a bitter, empty sound echoing off the walls. "A mistake." My voice felt alien even to me, trembling and raw with barely suppressed rage. "You're 19, Alex. My own brother. In my own house." The betrayal ran deeper than I could comprehend, the trust shattered more completely than I'd thought possible. I turned back to Hannah. and her beautiful features seemed suddenly foreign. The trust and love I'd once felt for her ripped away by a single, irreparable act. "I trusted you," I whispered, my voice breaking. The pain echoed in my ears, reverberating endlessly. "Both of you. How could you?" She moved toward me hesitantly, eyes swimming with tears. "Please, No." I cut her off, shaking my head slowly. A bitter realization dawning inside me. "You don't get to explain your way out of this." I spun around abruptly, unable to bear their faces any longer, staggering toward the stairs. Every step away from them felt like a small victory and an enormous loss. My entire life had collapsed within minutes. "Wait," Hannah cried desperately behind me, scrambling out of bed. "Don't leave. We need to talk." I paused only for a second, my hand gripping the cold banister tightly. My voice came out firm, even colder than the metal beneath my fingertips. "There's nothing left to say." As I slammed the front door behind me, leaving their cries behind, the sound echoed like the final nail in the coffin of our relationship. Driving away, I realized that everything I'd ever known about love, loyalty, and family was gone, shattered beyond recognition. And in its place stood nothing but a lingering question. What had I done to deserve such profound betrayal? The sun dipped lower into the horizon, its dying light bathing the street in a mournful glow, mirroring my fractured heart. There was no turning back now. I had seen what could not be unseen. The home I'd once cherished now felt like foreign ground, a place I could never return to. As I sped away from the wreckage, grief and anger warring within me, I knew only one thing for certain. My life would never be the same again. The motel room smelled faintly of stale cigarettes and industrial cleaner, the overhead fluorescent light casting harsh shadows on the peeling wallpaper. Sitting at the edge of the creaky bed, I stared blankly at the faded carpet, my head throbbing from sleeplessness and the persistent hum of regret and anger coursing through my veins. Outside, the occasional murmur of passing cars reminded me that life, indifferent as always, was carrying on despite my personal apocalypse. It had been 3 days since I'd walked in on Hannah and Alex. 3 days of phone calls, voicemails, and frantic texts that I had pointedly ignored. Hannah's voice echoed in my head, a broken record of empty apologies and hollow explanations that made me nauseous each time I replayed them. Alex had reached out once, a single text message laden with awkward remorse. "I'm sorry. Man, I never meant for it to happen." I had no reply for him. What could I possibly say? He had destroyed something sacred, something I had carefully built over years of trust, patience, and effort. Alex was my younger brother. I'd watched him grow from a mischievous kid into someone I was proud to call family. How had it come to this? How had the brotherly bond, once seemingly unbreakable, collapsed so completely? Sleep eluded me. Every time I closed my eyes, visions assaulted me, the betrayal playing over and over like a horror film I couldn't pause. I could still see Hannah's shocked expression and Alex's guilt-ridden face, burned into my consciousness. It hurt more than I ever imagined possible. It felt like grief, as though I was mourning a death, but this loss was somehow crueler, the pain rawer, more personal. I hadn't just lost a wife and a brother. I had lost my trust in everything. At around 3 in the morning, a knock at the door startled me from my troubled thoughts. For a moment, I hesitated. Was it Hannah, coming to beg forgiveness again, or Alex, seeking redemption he didn't deserve? The knocking grew louder, more persistent. Reluctantly, I stood, opened the door cautiously, and was relieved, yet perplexed, to see my best friend, Ethan, standing there, concern evident in his tired eyes. "Hey," he said quietly, surveying my disheveled appearance. "You haven't answered anyone's calls." I was getting worried. Without waiting for an invitation, Ethan pushed past me, taking in the dreary state of the room with a grimace. He sighed heavily, sinking onto the bed and fixing me with a piercing gaze. "Talk to me, Jake. What happened?" Ethan had been my closest friend since high school, the one person I knew would listen without judgment, without expectation. Still, saying it aloud felt like admitting the depth of the betrayal, making it undeniably real. My throat tightened as I forced out the words, my voice barely audible. I caught Hannah and Alex together, in our bed, in my own home. His eyes widened briefly, shock flickering across his features, then darkening into a protective rage. "Jesus, Jake. I'm so sorry." I shook my head bitterly, pain lacing each word. "I don't know what to do. My wife and my brother, the two people I trusted most, betrayed me. How do I move forward from something like this? Ethan reached out, placing a steady hand on my shoulder. You don't have to have all the answers right now. First things first, you can't stay here. Come stay at my place. You're not going through this alone. A deep wave of relief washed over me, gratitude mixing with my grief. I nodded numbly, feeling some small part of the crushing weight begin to lift. Ethan helped gather my belongings, his quiet strength offering me the support I hadn't even realized I desperately needed. When we arrived at his apartment, I collapsed onto the sofa, fatigue finally catching up with me. Yet, despite my exhaustion, my mind raced endlessly. How could I move forward from such profound betrayal? The next few days passed in a blur of confusion and numbness. Ethan, true to his nature, was patient, giving me space when I needed silence, offering company when solitude became overwhelming. But every quiet moment felt haunted by memories of family dinners, lazy Sundays on the couch, birthdays spent laughing together. Each memory, now tainted, stung like salt in an open wound. One afternoon, as I sat staring blankly at the TV screen, Ethan returned from work, holding a small envelope. "This came for you," he said quietly, handing it over with an expression of caution. My heart lurched when I recognized the handwriting, my mother's. My stomach tightened as I tore it open, dreading the contents. Inside was a neatly written note. "Jake, please come home. We know things are complicated right now, but family sticks together, even in difficult times. Let's talk this out as adults. We miss you, Mom." A bitter laugh escaped my lips as I crumpled the paper in my fist. "Family sticks together?" I spat sarcastically, shaking my head in disbelief. My own brother slept with my wife. Where was their loyalty then? Ethan watched silently, his jaw tense. After a moment, he spoke carefully. "Do you want to confront them? Might be good to get everything out. Tell them how you're really feeling." I considered his suggestion, feeling torn. Part of me wanted to run, to escape to a place where no one knew me, no one could hurt me. Another part, a deeper part, craved resolution, answers, an end to the relentless pain. I sighed deeply, looking at Ethan, a mixture of uncertainty and determination in my eyes. Maybe you're right. Maybe I need to confront them, make them face what they've done. But how do I even start? Ethan placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. By being honest, they need to know exactly what they've done. Not just what they did, but how deeply they've hurt you. As painful as it was, I knew Ethan was right. This wasn't something I could hide from or ignore. I had to confront my family, face the betrayal head-on, and decide whether any part of these broken bonds was salvageable. Pulling out my phone, hands trembling slightly, I sent a message to my mother, a brief, clear response, leaving no room for doubt. "Fine. Let's talk. Tomorrow at 6, at home. Everyone needs to be there." Her reply came almost instantly, relief evident in the hurried response. I placed the phone on the table, heart pounding as the weight of what lay ahead settled over me. This conversation would either mend the wounds or tear apart whatever remained of my family. Whatever the outcome, one thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same again. My childhood home felt different as I parked my car along the curb the following evening. The familiar white-painted walls, blooming flower beds, and neatly trimmed hedges were no longer sources of comfort. Instead, they filled me with an intense anxiety that tightened my chest. The house, which had once symbolized security and happiness, now represented betrayal and disillusionment. Stepping out onto the sidewalk, I steadied my breathing and glanced upward. Twilight cloaked the sky in deepening shades of violet and indigo, casting long, eerie shadows over the yard. Through the large front window, I glimpsed my parents sitting silently in the living room, their forms illuminated by the dim glow of the lamp. Alex sat apart from them, shoulders hunched, his expression tense. The sight of him sent a fresh wave of hurt coursing through me. I hesitated for a moment before pushing forward, footsteps echoing in my ears as I approached the front door. As I raised my hand to knock, the door opened abruptly, revealing my mother. Her usually vibrant eyes appeared dull and weary, lined with concern. "Jake," she breathed out softly, voice laced with caution and relief. "I'm glad you came." I nodded silently, my jaw tightening as I stepped inside. The atmosphere was suffocatingly tense. My father stood silently near the mantelpiece, his normally sturdy posture weakened by visible strain. Alex glanced up momentarily, his eyes wide and troubled, then quickly looked away, unable to maintain eye contact. The silence hung thickly, broken finally by my mother's hesitant voice. "Jake, come sit. Let's talk about this, like adults." I stood motionless for a moment, assessing the room, feeling strangely detached. "Where's Hannah?" I asked flatly. My mother exchanged a troubled glance with my father, then sighed deeply. "We didn't think bringing her would be wise tonight. So you just want to talk about this without the person most directly involved?" I asked, frustration bubbling beneath my carefully controlled voice. "How can we even begin to discuss this if she's not here?" Alex shifted uncomfortably in his seat, running a nervous hand through his hair. "Jake," he began hesitantly, "you have every right to be furious." "I'm so—" "Don't," I interrupted sharply, holding up my hand. "Don't you dare say you're sorry again. If you really meant it, you wouldn't have done this. Your apology is meaningless." Alex sank back, visibly deflated. My mother looked distressed, pressing a trembling hand to her forehead. "Jake, please," she said softly, her voice pleading. "We're not here to argue. We need to heal. We're family, and we must move forward." My gaze hardened. "Heal? Move forward?" My voice rose slightly. The anger I tried so hard to keep in check slowly breaking free. "Did any of you even stop to consider what this has done to me? To my marriage? To my trust in my own brother? My father?" Quiet until now, finally spoke up, his deep voice carrying weight. "Jake, we all agree what Alex and Hannah did was unacceptable. But they're young." "Young?" My voice rose, incredulous and filled with hurt. "Alex is 19, old enough to know right from wrong. And Hannah? She was my wife, someone I built my life around. Being young doesn't excuse betrayal. Do you even understand the severity of what they've done?" A tense silence followed. My father exhaled deeply, his shoulders sagging. "Son, we're trying to find a path forward. We can't undo what's happened. We have to find a way to forgive." My throat tightened, and my voice dropped to a whisper. "Forgiveness isn't something you can demand from me right now. You don't get to decide how I heal." Turning slowly, I faced Alex directly, forcing him to meet my gaze. "I raised you," I said quietly, each word heavy with pain. "When Dad worked late, I helped you with homework. When you got bullied, I fought for you. When you needed someone to lean on, I was there. I never imagined you'd repay that by betraying me this way." Alex stared at the floor, tears filling his eyes. "I messed up, Jake. I know that now. I was stupid, selfish. I didn't think about how much it had hurt you." "No, you didn't," I said quietly. "Because you've always been shielded, protected. You've never had to face consequences. Maybe that's our fault." My gaze flicked momentarily to our parents, who shifted uncomfortably. "Maybe we all bear some responsibility. But this," I shook my head bitterly, voice breaking. "This is beyond anything I can understand or forgive." My mother reached out, her voice soft. "Jake, you're right. We can't force forgiveness. But you're both our sons. This family can't break apart over this." I stared at her, stunned. "It already has," I replied softly, my voice empty. "Family isn't just about blood. It's about trust, loyalty, respect. Alex destroyed all of that. You all did, by expecting me to move on, as though my pain is a temporary inconvenience." My father's eyes flickered with something like regret, his voice rough when he spoke. "We're sorry, Jake. We just don't want to lose you." "Then maybe you should have been there for me when I needed you most," I whispered, exhaustion settling in my bones. A long silence stretched between us. Finally, my mother spoke, her voice shaky. "So what do we do, Jake? Where do we go from here?" I exhaled deeply, the answer bitter yet necessary. "I think I need space. From all of you." Shock rippled through their expressions. "Jake," my father began, but I cut him off gently. "This family has always revolved around pretending things are fine," I said quietly. "I'm tired of pretending. I need time. Maybe eventually I can heal, maybe not. But forcing it now won't make it better." Turning to Alex, I forced myself to meet his tortured gaze one last time. "Someday, maybe, I can find forgiveness. But right now, seeing your face only reminds me of what I lost." He nodded slowly, accepting this truth. With nothing left to say, I moved to the door. "Take care of each other," I whispered. "But don't look for me. Not until I'm ready." Closing the door gently behind me, I stepped into the cool night air, feeling simultaneously broken and free. As I walked back to my car, each step felt heavier yet lighter somehow, the paradox of liberation and loss mixing within me. My family had always been my anchor, my foundation. Now, they were my deepest wound. As I drove away, leaving my past behind in the rearview mirror, I knew the road ahead would be uncertain, challenging, and lonely. But it would be mine alone. For the first time in years, I was truly free. Free to discover who I was without the shadows of betrayal lingering in every corner. Whatever happened next, I had chosen this path, and I would walk it, alone, but with purpose. The days that followed the confrontation with my family felt surreal, an endless stretch of restless nights and quiet days, each hour carrying the weight of my newfound solitude. I'd returned to Ethan's apartment immediately after leaving my family home, where he'd greeted me with a concerned yet understanding expression. Ethan had always been a steadfast presence in my life. And right now, his friendship was the only anchor I could rely on. As I sat quietly on his couch, staring blankly at the muted television, Ethan approached with 2 steaming mugs of coffee. He placed one gently in my hand and took the seat beside me, his silence giving me the space to speak when ready. I didn't think it would feel this hard, I finally admitted, my voice breaking the stillness of the room. I thought leaving would be a relief, but it feels empty. Ethan nodded slowly, sipping his coffee thoughtfully before responding. Jake, you've been through a trauma. It's okay to feel conflicted. The hardest decisions usually come with the deepest emotions. I looked down into my coffee cup, the swirling darkness reflecting how lost I felt. How do I even start over from here? I asked softly, the weight of uncertainty heavy in my words. Everything I built, my marriage, my relationships with my family, they're just gone. Ethan placed a firm hand on my shoulder. You don't have to have everything figured out right away. Maybe now is your time to rediscover who you are without anyone else's expectations or disappointments. Just you. His words resonated, and I knew he was right. I needed space to heal. Space to redefine my life on my own terms. But where to begin? Later that afternoon, while Ethan was out at work, I sat in front of my laptop, idly browsing websites about remote towns and quiet retreats. I'd always been drawn to nature. Something about wide-open spaces had always given me a sense of clarity and peace. The idea of escaping, even temporarily, was suddenly very appealing. As I scrolled through images of mountains, lakes, and forests, one place captured my attention, a small mountain town in Colorado. Nestled in a valley surrounded by snow-capped peaks and vast stretches of untouched wilderness. The images of wooden cabins, cozy cafes, and winding trails evoked a longing for simplicity and isolation. It felt like exactly what I needed, a place where no one knew me, where I could rebuild myself from the ground up. Before I could overthink it, I booked a cabin for a month-long stay. The idea was spontaneous, almost impulsive, but it also felt like the first deliberate choice I'd made purely for myself in years. As I finalized the reservation, a spark of excitement stirred within me, an emotion I hadn't felt since my life unraveled. Ethan was supportive when I shared my decision. He understood the need for distance and time away from everything familiar. On the morning of my departure, he stood beside my car, his eyes earnest. Just promise me you'll keep in touch, Ethan said, handing me a small envelope. And call me anytime, day or night. You're not alone, Jake. I nodded gratefully, feeling a sudden lump form in my throat. Thank you, I managed, my voice thick with emotion. For everything. The drive to Colorado took 2 days. Each mile I traveled seemed to put more distance between me and the pain I'd left behind. The further west I drove, the lighter I felt, as though shedding layers of anguish and betrayal with each passing town. When I finally reached the small mountain community, the serenity of the landscape immediately struck me. Towering pines framed the winding road, while the crystal-clear lake mirrored the rugged mountains. The air was crisp, clean, and invigorating. My rented cabin sat secluded on the outskirts of town, nestled among pine trees and overlooking the tranquil waters of the lake. Stepping inside, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The interior was warm and rustic, filled with wooden furnishings and soft lighting. A large stone fireplace dominated the cozy living room, and wide windows offered stunning views of the surrounding wilderness. In the following days, my life fell into a gentle rhythm. Each morning, I rose early, brewed coffee, and sat quietly on the cabin's porch, watching the sunrise cast gold and amber hues over the mountains. Afternoons were spent hiking along forest trails or kayaking across the placid lake, where silence and solitude became my companions. With each passing day, I felt the emotional turmoil inside me slowly begin to untangle. The pain of Hannah's betrayal, the fracture caused by Alex's disloyalty, the constant disappointment from my parents, these burdens started to lose their suffocating grip. I didn't forgive or forget, rather. I found ways to accept that their actions did not define my worth or my future. During the quiet evenings, I began journaling, pouring out my thoughts and emotions onto paper. Writing helped clarify my feelings and offered a release for the bitterness and resentment I'd carried. I discovered, to my surprise, a quiet strength within myself that had been buried beneath years of suppressed emotions and unspoken disappointments. One chilly morning, while sipping coffee at a small cafe in town, I met Rachel, a local bookstore owner whose calm demeanor and easy smile immediately put me at ease. Our conversation flowed naturally, touching on books, music, and our shared love for hiking trails. As we parted ways that day, she invited me to visit her bookstore anytime I wanted company or a new recommendation. Over the next week, visits to Rachel's bookstore became a comforting routine. We spent hours exchanging stories and discussing literature, our conversation slowly shifting from casual to meaningful. Rachel was insightful and genuine, her presence offering a warmth that I'd sorely missed. One evening, while sitting by the fireplace in my cabin, I reached for the small envelope Ethan had given me before I left. Inside was a simple handwritten note. "Jake, life sometimes leads us down dark paths, but remember, it's never too late to find new light. I'm always here for you. Ethan." His words moved me deeply. Ethan had known exactly what I needed, even before I did. Reflecting on his note, I realized that despite everything I'd lost, there was still potential for new beginnings. Hannah and Alex had taken so much from me, but in some unexpected way, their betrayal had also given me a chance to truly start over, free from expectations and past disappointments. I set Ethan's note on the mantelpiece, vowing to myself to build something new, something stronger, out of the wreckage they'd left behind. As I gazed into the dancing flames, a sense of peace settled within me. Here, in this quiet mountain town, surrounded by nature's profound stillness, I could finally hear my own voice clearly. For the first time in my life, I understood that I alone was responsible for my happiness. I had survived the worst betrayal imaginable, and somehow it had made me realize the strength within myself. The road ahead was uncertain, but that uncertainty no longer terrified me. Instead, it offered hope, an opportunity to reclaim my life, to build a future that was entirely my own. In the solitude of the mountains, I had finally found the courage to let go and to begin again. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking Reddit cheating stories happening around you.